Live daily gay evening news show, and it's 7 p.m. Thursday, February 27th, 2020. We begin tonight with breaking Q news. President Trump has appointed Vice President Pence to deal with the coronavirus, and we have a lot to tell you in relation to this. Before we begin, we've prepared this package. Watch this.
Mike will be working with the professionals, doctors, and everybody else that's working. The team is brilliant. I spent a lot of time with the team over the last couple of weeks, but they're totally brilliant, and we're doing really well, and Mike is going to be in charge, and Mike will report back to me.
Tonight we announce coronavirus comes to America. Here is the latest. Last night, President Trump announced at a press conference that Vice President Pence would coordinate the government response to the public health threat as he played down the immediate danger spreading rapidly across the globe. Today, Vice President Pence held a meeting of the government's coronavirus task force. The White House has moved on Thursday today to tighten control of coronavirus messaging by government health officials and scientists, directing them to coordinate all statements and public appearances with the Office of the Vice President. Vice President Mike Pence said today that he had selected Dr. Deborah Birx, the director of the United States effort to combat HIV and AIDS, to serve as the coronavirus response coordinator for the White House, enlisting an experienced scientist and physician to manage the response to the potential spread of this virus. Mr. Trump said that, quote, "Mike is going to be in charge, and Mike will report back to me." Mr. Pence said it would be Dr. Birx. Meanwhile, Alex Azar, the Health and Human Services Secretary, remains the chairman of the government's coronavirus task force. These efforts apparently did not calm financial markets as we bring you breaking news of today's largest single-day Wall Street loss in history. Watch this.
The Dow tumbling more than 1,000 points today as the world economy reacts to the growing coronavirus outbreak. The Dow and S&P now on track for the worst week since the 2008 financial crisis, falling sharply all week. The Dow dropping 10% below its most recent peak, putting it into correction territory. CNN's Allison Kosik joins me now live from the stock exchange. Allison, talk us through just how significant this is.
Well, clearly this is super significant. Jaw-dropping to see the Dow fall over 1,100 points. And it's especially significant because look what happened last week. Just last week, we saw the major indices hitting all-time highs. And it just took 10 trading sessions for the Dow to go from an all-time high to a correction, which happened today, which is a 10% fall from a recent high. Even when stocks were reaching those lofty highs, there was a lot of concern that traders would kind of be in for a rude awakening because there was a lot of complacency about the coronavirus. Well, now that rude awakening has come because, Jake, more than $1 trillion in stock market value has literally been wiped out. Jake?
And Allison, Goldman Sachs is warning American companies will likely generate no earnings in 2020.
That is what Goldman Sachs has reported today, saying that U.S. companies are expected to report no profit gains for the year. Some are saying that's a little inflammatory, but it's basing its very downgraded forecasts on the impact of the coronavirus being more widespread than first expected. It's also a reflection of a decline in Chinese economic activity, a decline in lower demand in U.S. exports, and supply chain disruptions for U.S. companies, which we are hearing from today from Microsoft, Anheuser-Busch, and of course we've heard from Apple. Now there is one bright spot. We did see shares of 3M rise today. Looks like investors are bullish on masks.
So good evening again. It's 7 p.m. Thursday, February 27th, 2020, and we continue our coronavirus story in just moments. It is time to queer up the news, and we are literally out of the closet and into the headlines. So many of your stories next on Q News Tonight. We continue with our breaking Q news, and here is today's coronavirus bullet points. The first case in the United States has been identified in California that is not connected with traveling outside the United States, specifically in Asia. So it is the first proof of community transmission in America. In related news to this, California Governor Gavin Newsom has said today that the state is monitoring 8,400 people who are suspected in California of coronavirus. Internationally, Japan announced today that it will close all of its schools for at least until April as a defense against spreading the virus in that country. In related news on coronavirus, the U.S. State Department announced today that they have declared a Level 3 travel advisory alert for any travel to South Korea. Finally, we make the note at Q News tonight. We have reported this story repeatedly since its beginning on January 9th, and coronavirus does seem to be a threat to America. Gentlemen, what do you think?
I think the scariest part about all of this is something that we saw start to happen today. Trump has announced that all communication about coronavirus is going to come to us through Mike Pence. We reported that just yesterday he was holding back information, or maybe just didn't know it, that he said everything was fine, that this was under control, that it shouldn't be a problem, and that the stock market was fine. These are words he said through several tweets yesterday, and today we're finding out all of our information is going to come through this same lens of lies that he's been feeding us for years. And when it comes to our public health, I don't see how that could be possible. When everything is crashing like this today, it is definitely very alarming.
Yeah. What you've done in the past is a very good indicator of what you will do in the future, and the fact that he's basically appointed the Vice President, Mike Pence, as the czar, if you will, to oversee the coronavirus spread here in the United States. It's very concerning because Mike Pence has a horrible record, having been the governor of Indiana, overseeing one of the largest outbreaks of the HIV virus in the state of Indiana. Also very concerning, Mike Pence has also served time in U.S. Congress, even going as far back as 2001, saying that he didn't believe that cigarette smoke actually kills people, first and second hand. This is where we're at right now in American history. But I think it's just important to note that knowledge is power, and that people need to take necessary precautions to protect themselves, and 60% less, you have a 60% decreased likelihood of contracting the coronavirus if you wash your hands.
Absolutely. That is the number one issue tonight that we address. If you wash your hands in precaution, you dramatically reduce the risk of transaction of coronavirus. Next week, we are going to report, as we have done on coronavirus at Q News tonight, and how it affects the LGBT community. There's many conversations to be had here in terms of specific effects related to HIV and other immune deficiency with the coronavirus. Next week, we're going to give you much of the reporting news of what to do in terms of preparing for coronavirus expansion and spreading in the United States. So again, we welcome you to Q News tonight. We remind you that we are live at this moment. This is an unscripted news show, so anything can happen. Tonight, we bring you the news of and a perspective from the LGBT community. I'm your anchor, Al Ferguson, and these are my co-anchors, Aaron Darr, and my co-anchor, Napoleon Plays. So let's continue by queuing up, which stands for queering up. Let's queue up the news. We queue up entertainment tonight to report an amazing new music video that has been released by Taylor Swift as she wears male drag for her new The Man music video. Napoleon, tell us what's happening here.
Some of the lyrics from this video that you can see behind us. I'd be a fearless leader. I'd be an alpha type. When everyone believes ya, what's that like? I'm so sick of running as fast as I can, wondering if I'd get there quicker if I was a man. The entire video showcases her in drag, maybe even a little bit farther with prosthetics, to see how in different scenarios her life might be a lot easier if she were a man. It shows her on Money. It shows her, obviously, right now with her legs open on a subway. It shows her with a family. It shows her in just different scenarios. One of the things that's really interesting about this is that it does open up the idea of being your best self, because that's really what she's talking about. If she were a man, drag embraces that a lot. You can be your best self if you're dressing up as a woman or if you're being a drag queen, not a king like she is here. But the idea of a transformation coming from yourself or from society. And
this video we're watching, so Taylor Swift is the male character, the one that's sitting in the middle with the legs wide open.
She's the lead. She's in full gear. And during this entire thing, she is the person that you're watching throughout this entire video.
Yeah, I see there. Aaron, any
But also the double standard of men and women in society. A man can manspread on a subway, but a woman couldn't do that because we label her as a whore because she has her legs spread open. We could not have a woman openly defecating or urinating in public, but it's okay for a man to do it. It's okay for a man to walk around in public without a shirt on, but a woman can't do it because her tits are deemed to be something controversial, a double standard, and I'm glad that Taylor Swift's bringing attention to that.
Yeah, it's and it has to be watched not only from the statement that the video makes, but unlike the last video, which I wasn't so crazy about the music, this is really, really an interesting video. Of course, America, we're not showing it to you because we don't want Q News Tonight to be pulled down out of YouTube or Facebook. So tune in and go and find it, and it's quite amazing. We continue in queuing up Vote 2020 to report that Pete Buttigieg is facing criticism for a tweet about the 1960s civil rights era. Before we have this conversation of this story, we've prepared this. Watch this.
And I am not looking forward to a scenario where it comes down to Donald Trump with his nostalgia for the social order of the 1950s and Bernie Sanders with a nostalgia for the revolutionary politics of the 1960s.
So as our viewers just saw in that video, Mayor Pete Buttigieg, Democratic presidential candidate in the 2020 primary for president, is really referring to Cuba's social reforms that were accompanied by grievous human rights abuses, mass roundups, press suppression, and the imprisonment of many LGBTQ individuals in Fidel Castro's Cuba. This, of course, this revolution that he's referring to is the revolution under Fidel Castro. He's not referring to any kind of other revolution in the 1960s. Of course, we have the Stonewall Uprising, the Civil Rights Movement. This is people, unfortunately, grasping at straws right now to make any kind of comparison in which Pete would be defaming the Civil Rights Movement, if you will.
That was one of my favorite things about the debate, actually, the other day. It was like going through an entire history lesson. You have the 50s mentioned, the 60s mentioned, and then you have a little bit of the Cold War with Russia mentioned here. You have something sprinkled in. It was like our greatest hits of international fears that we've had all coming back at once.
Because you have two individuals that want to take us back. You have Donald Trump, our president, that wants to take us back to a time in the United States history, the 1950s, where it wasn't necessarily fair, equal, or a widespread opportunity for all people, especially women and LGBT people of color, minorities. And then you have Bernie Sanders, who could likely be the Democratic nominee for president, who wants to take us back to a time in history, a revolutionary time in history in the 1960s, Fidel Castro's Cuba, in which that was not a great time for the LGBTQ community or the people of Cuba.
It's shocking to me, given the moment in time we are. Let's go back to 2015, and President Obama is in the White House, our first black president. Who could have possibly imagined just 5 years ago that we would have a Donald Trump for president? The leading candidate for the Democrats would be a Bernie Sanders, and whatever labeling that's going to be there. The focus on socialism versus Trumpism, perhaps communism versus fascism, and you sprinkle that in with a pandemic of the coronavirus and the effects it's going to have on the election cycle in 2020. How much more can America and the world take in terms of where we're going? It's fascinating to me, and it directly affects the LGBT community directly in terms of what we're looking at.
That's right, and we will be with you guys for the entirety of these processes as we move forward, speaking on behalf of the LGBT community, because we want to know, are LGBT voices important to you? Can the news of the world have a gay community perspective? If you, like us, think the answer is a resounding yes, then like and subscribe to Q News Tonight on YouTube and on Facebook. Do our gay cultural stories impact you, your friends, and your family? Start a watch party. Get your circle involved in our conversation as it supports the entirety of the gay community.
And we thank you, America and the world. Last week, nearly 100,000 watched in YouTube, which is really quite amazing. Thank you. We queue up religion tonight to go to India, and we are reporting that 35 are dead in New Delhi as religious riots have hit a fourth day in India. And we prepare you before you see this video, even though we've carefully edited the images you're going to see, it is still very disturbing. Watch this.
ट्रंप के जाने तक तो हम शांति से जा रहे हैं, लेकिन उसके बाद हम आपकी भी नहीं सुनेंगे।
These are some of the worst attacks that New Delhi has seen in over 3 decades. This all started with the Citizenship Amendment Act, which was put forward by Modi, which is essentially a 2-part process that, one, asked everybody to state which identity they had in terms of religion, and then told everybody that if they made under a certain amount, that they were not able to be a part of the community. So it was a short way of segregating Muslims from being actual citizens who are now being kicked out if they cannot prove their worth financially. This has been a very big problem. We're seeing one more protest occur right here. There have been a lot of calls to police that are being said to do nothing. Ambulances are being blocked from getting to the scenes of the events. Journalists are being attacked. We're seeing rocks literally thrown, weapons fired. We're watching how easily rights can be taken away, as well as citizenship. It's scary.
I continue to watch stories like this all over the world, but frankly, also in America. Doesn't it remind you of Charlottesville in a way? Not to this dramatic result, but there's this tension, this underlying tension between religions and races and immigration and cultures. There's just this rawness, and I can't help but think we've watched over the last 3.5 years what we watch in America is going on in other places in the world, and what's going on in other places of the world is going on here in America, and it's something that we're following at happening out dramatically.
Yes, and we will continue to follow it because Q News Tonight is part of the Happening Out television network. As you know, we are the Daily News. But you can also watch the best of entertainment live every Monday night at 8 p.m. on happening.fun. We are also part of the most popular live gay TV show in the world, every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. on It's Happening Out. It's a talk show like television's The View, but with a whole lot of gay people.
And we could use a good sprinkling of The View and some fun tonight on this Thursday evening. We continue by queuing up the USA and report, of course, South Carolina, super topical because of the primary this weekend. The state of South Carolina is being sued by students due to an anti-LGBTQ health education law. Aaron, tell us what's happening here.
So a group of LGBTQ students and supportive organizations that are pro-LGBT have sued the state of South Carolina over a law that prohibits public school health education courses from including any discussion of homosexuality or same-sex relationships, except in the context of sexually transmitted diseases. So essentially what this is doing is it's putting a gag order, if you will, in context of law, where teachers are not allowed to talk about same-sex relationships in the classroom. So you're gagging teachers from being able to speak of which is very concerning because this is in direct violation of the United States 14th Amendment. It violates the Equality Clause of the U.S. Constitution. So I take my own personal experience. I've been very open about the fact with our viewers and for people for nearly a decade now that, you know, I was diagnosed HIV positive when I was 16 years old, 2 days before Christmas. And what prompted me to get that HIV test was a health class. And in that health class, it was interesting because I grew up very conservative in the state of Ohio, and there were no same-sex relationships that were talked about in that school. So I kind of had to try to put everything in my own perspective and see how I would be affected. But I think it's important that when you have these conversations that they are wide-ranging and the tent is as big as possible to include the most affected or potentially affected as possible in terms of sex education.
I'm curious, in the lawsuit that's been brought, have you read or understand any projections on what likely will happen here? Or can you project what you think is going to happen?
Well, this isn't the first time that this has gone on. I mean, it's happening right now. It's the state of South Carolina, but this is also Mississippi, Alabama. There are other states. This isn't uncommon. And also, this is something that goes on right here in the state of Florida. School boards locally can decide whether or not teachers should be able to talk about homosexual relationships or even mention the word HIV/AIDS. The same thing goes for the Holocaust across the country. It's very concerning, but this is why it's so important that we continue to expand knowledge as it pertains to HIV/AIDS and sexually transmitted diseases.
In a related vein, we continue to queue up the USA to report a strange story in reverse. 3 students fighting to ban transgender athletes are getting a Courage Award. Very strange story, of course, at Fox, helping to report it. We've packaged and watched this.
It's really hard to stand up, Christiana. You're the lawyer here representing. I'm going to get to everybody here on the panel, but to Chelsea next, who's going to William and Mary next year. But it's really hard to stand up for what's obvious and right. Most people know what's right here.
No, I think you're exactly right. I mean, I think courage begets courage, and it's been an incredibly courageous act for these young women to stand up and say, look, this is not fair. We just want to restore a level playing field to our sport.
We're bringing you guys an update to the story we had from about a week ago, where we had these 3 specific athletes target 2 specific trans athletes in their high school. They were suing them. They were backed by the Alliance Defending Freedom, an anti-LGBT group, hate group, and they are being given awards of courage by the Republican Party because they are protecting women's sports. That's their slogan, that they're protecting women's sports, because as they've stated, the trans athletes that have been competing so far are not women. They are men. They are identified in the documentation as men, and that is how they see them. Part of the Democratic Party chair responded to this by saying that this is beyond shameful for the Connecticut Republicans to use high school students struggling with a complex and highly personal issues to raise money for their party. And that's what we're seeing here. We're seeing more corruption from one party to back another. Young children, in terms of their corruption, to fight equality in the trans community.
Case in point, if you think the Republican Party, the Trump administration, is a friend or ally to the LGBTQ community, completely delusional. Really.
And the shocking thing to me here, I'm not a fan of Laura Ingraham, but I am a fan of free speech. So I support their ability to have this conversation and say what they want. But I continue to misunderstand how the president or the GOP can be held up as being supportive of the LGBT community when they go this far.
I do want to make the argument that their defense has been that the opportunities, scholarships, and other things are being taken away from cisgendered females that are competing in high school and other sports. If that's
part of it is it's biological, that men are stronger or more capable or have a capacity about them in which women don't. So it's creating a level playing field. I mean, that's essentially what this is, and those girls are saying it's unfair.
Well, and to that point, in every possible way, you prove that is not true. So.
A lot of those trends.
All right. Tonight we are broadcasting from our new set in the middle of the World AIDS Museum and Education Center in Wilton Manors and Fort Lauderdale, Florida. We joke we're coming from the gayest place on planet Earth, and the joke that I just made, I'm going to suffer so much for the joke that I just made. We also want to thank our set designer, Concepto Modern Living, right here in Fort Lauderdale to help make this possible, sitting right here in this iconic location of the World AIDS Museum. Finally tonight at Q News Tonight, we want to bring the big finish. It sounds fun, doesn't it? The big finish? play on words?
You,
All right.
as long as we've had it last throughout the entirety of the episode and we've slowly made it come along, then I'll be ready to go. Too much? Too soon?
Slowly.
Ready for Corona?
All right. There are many stories today that we only want to mention. Let's see if Aaron and Napoleon and I can entertain each other. Napoleon proves that he's not going to probably be able to do that. And we're going to have a lightning round on the LGBT news of the day and news with an LGBT perspective. If they talk too much or are not entertaining, I'm going to ring the bell in our big finish. Gentlemen, we do understand the rules, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Got some.
Let's do it.
All right.
Let's go.
All right. So here we go. Cue news tonight. The big finish. The big finish. Okay. We're definitely all going to die.
Literally dying as we speak. Napoleon's shirt is so gay, it's blinding me.
It's fine. That's what my voices tell me in my head every single day. So today is no different.
And this was a late night comment about Vice President Pence's appointment to manage the coronavirus. Morons leading morons. That's what we're getting ready to watch. The big finish. Pete Davidson says his career would be over if he acted like Ariana Grande.
There's no joke here. I'm just vindicated because I've been complaining for a year and a half. So thank you, Pete Davidson, for showing. And no, your career is not hers.
Yeah, I think Pete Davidson's doing a really good job this week by defaming the character of his fellow castmates on SNL. So he's destroying his own career.
Yeah. And how did Pete Davidson get Ariana Grande in the first place? I want to know. The big finish. The Pope, beautiful story, met yesterday with coronavirus sufferers, and today he's sick.
Maybe it's a coincidence, who knows? When I heard the story, I immediately thought of Jesus meeting with lepers. In all seriousness, I mean, it's sad, and I really hope that he doesn't have the virus.
Yeah, I thought very similarly. I thought of that preacher of hate that was saying that homosexuals caused this disease. And I wonder what he's saying now that the Pope might have this.
Oh, I haven't thought about that. That's a really interesting observation. And at the bottom, I won't make a joke either because Aaron has shamed me into not making a joke about the Pope. We continue with the big finish. After 120 years of failure, congratulations, House. You finally passed anti-lynching legislation.
And in a completely unrelated note, I bet that I can guess what Trump's next executive order will overturn.
Yes. The House finally passes anti-lynching legislation, but no thanks to the 5 Republicans in U.S. Congress that voted against it.
And I can't wait for history to try to document how they voted in 2020 against lynching.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I wonder what Joy Villa would say about this story.
Oh, okay.
You say Joy, I say Uncle Tom.
Oh, okay. The big America, we are going to do a special on Joy Villa next Thursday at 8 o'clock. You'll hear more about that. The big finish. English woman tastes sweet victory in an annual pancake race.
RuPaul is not English, okay?
I just want to make another yeast infection joke, and I can't now.
Or the creation of alcohol in a woman's bladder. It started the sugar from this pancake win of this English woman. The big finish. I'm being jeered by the production staff here at the World AIDS Museum. The big finish. Wait, we've got another birthday celebration. Postmortem. Happy 88th birthday to the late, great Elizabeth Taylor.
I hope that people, when they remember Elizabeth Taylor, they truly remember the legacy she leaves behind for her work with the HIV/AIDS community. So happy, unfortunate birthday because she's not here.
Well, she'd probably be very happy today. I mean, we're seeing polygamy legalized all over the country, so she'd have a lot more places to go and a lot more of a collection behind her.
So Cleopatra of her.
I want to take off these diamond earrings and go, here they are. They've always brought me luck. The big finish. On this day in 1951, the U.S. ratified the 22nd Amendment.
And I have to clarify, because I don't think that President Trump even knows how to spell the word amendment, that the 22nd Amendment was ratified on this day in 1951, and what it did was it precluded a U.S. president from serving more than 2 terms.
Yeah, that's my joke always with the on this day, is that Trump's about to take it away. And this is actually one that he's already actually joked about. He's already saying I should get a 3rd term. I'm going to be here longer. Well, it's not going to be a joke when he actually is there longer.
And 69 years later, after amending this amendment, the 22nd Amendment was ratified, President Trump has still not read the Constitution of the United States. The big finish. South Carolina primary is on Saturday.
For one day only, America cares about black people.
Oh my gosh, that is awful. That's so not true. But the South Carolina primary is this Saturday, and I do expect that Joe Biden is going to win the state anywhere between 15 to 18 points.
We shall see, but I am finally happy that we are moving beyond Iowa disaster in management, New Hampshire, very white, Nevada, another caucus, South Carolina, very small. We have Super Tuesday coming, and then finally we get to play in Florida with our 5 million voters. Finally, we're going to talk about something a bit more dramatic for the election. So that is today's news for the LGBT community on the world's first daily gay evening news show. Remember, if it's important to the LGBT community, it's important to Q News Tonight. We are literally, as we said at the top of the show, out of the closet and into the headlines. And this is Q News Tonight. Thank you, and we see you daily at 7 p.m.